The massive glass dome of the Galactic Council chambers sparkled under the light of 3 different suns. Inside, representatives from 47 different species sat in their specially designed seats. Some breathed oxygen, others methane. Some had fur. Others had scales or energy fields that glowed softly in the dim light. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood at the center podium. Her simple black uniform looked plain next to the colorful robes and biosuits of the other delegates. She held a small datapad in her hands, but she did not look at it. She had memorized every word of what she was about to say. "Honored representatives," Elena began, her voice clear and steady. "I stand before you today to deliver a message from the Terran Confederation." The chamber fell silent. Even the energy beings from the ethereal collective stopped their gentle humming. Everyone knew humans were important in the galaxy. They had been part of the Council for over 200 years. Human ships patrolled trade routes. Human doctors worked in refugee camps. Human engineers fixed problems on 1,000 different worlds. Effective immediately, Elena continued, humanity withdraws from all treaties, alliances, and agreements with the Galactic Council and its member species. Shocked gasps filled the chamber. Representative Kethvar from the Zephyrian Empire stood up quickly. His 4 arms waved in the air as he spoke. "This is impossible. What about the Outer Rim patrols? What about the medical stations?" Elena looked at him calmly. "All human personnel have been recalled. All facilities have been transferred to local authorities or shut down safely." "But why?" asked Counselor Zix, her crystalline body flashing different colors as emotions ran through her. "Have we offended your species somehow? Can we fix this problem?" For a moment, Elena's calm mask slipped. Something like sadness crossed her face. Then it was gone. "Some decisions must be made alone. Some paths must be walked without help. We cannot stay." "Cannot or will not?" demanded General Theclon. The proud Valorian warrior's scales turned dark red with anger. "Is this how humans show loyalty? By running away when things get difficult?" Elena met his angry stare without flinching. "What is coming cannot be stopped by treaties or armies or unity. Preparation must happen in isolation. Growth must happen through struggle." "Speak plainly, human," Theclon growled. "Stop hiding behind riddles." "Some knowledge is too dangerous to share," Elena said quietly. "Some burdens are too heavy to place on others. History will judge whether we chose correctly." She touched a control on her datapad. Holographic displays appeared around the chamber, showing star charts with hundreds of red dots. These are the locations of all human colonies, stations, and ships as of 72 hours ago. The dots began to blink out, one by one, until the display showed empty space where human civilization had been. "Impossible," whispered Dr. Yalna from the Healers Guild. "There were 12 million humans on Kepler Station alone. You cannot move that many people without someone noticing." "The evacuation has been ongoing for 18 months, Elena admitted. "We moved slowly and carefully. We did not want to cause panic." 18 months? Kethvar's voice rose to a shriek. "You have been lying to us for 18 months? "We have been protecting you for 18 months, Elena corrected. "From knowledge that would destroy hope. From choices that would damn you all." Supreme Counselor Venth, the ancient leader of the Council, finally spoke. Her voice was like wind through dead leaves. "In 3,000 years of Council history, no member species has ever simply left. What do you know that we do not?" Elena closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, they were filled with an old pain. "We know what happens to galaxies that depend too much on others. We know what happens to species that never learn to stand alone. We know what judges civilizations and finds them wanting." "Judges?" Venth leaned forward. "The universe itself," Elena said softly, and judgment is coming whether we stay or go. The only difference is whether any of you will survive it." Chaos erupted in the chamber. Representatives shouted questions in dozens of languages. Some demanded Elena be arrested. Others begged her to explain. A few sat in stunned silence. Elena waited for the noise to die down. Then she spoke her final words to the Galactic Council. "We have left detailed instructions for maintaining critical systems. We have transferred technology you will need. We have done everything we can, without dooming you all." She paused. "Remember this moment. Remember that we did not abandon you out of hate or fear or selfishness. When the darkness comes, remember that everything we did was to give you a chance." She stepped away from the podium. Her aide, a young man named David, joined her. Together, they walked toward the exit. "Wait," called Counselor Zeeks. "Where will you go?" Elena stopped but did not turn around. "Somewhere we can hurt no one else. Somewhere we can become what we must become." Her voice broke slightly. "Somewhere we can prepare for the worst choice any species has ever had to make." The door sealed behind them with a soft hiss. In the chamber, 47 species sat in stunned silence. Outside the windows, the stars looked the same as always. But somehow, the galaxy felt emptier already. Within hours, reports came in from across the galaxy. Human ships were powering down and going dark. Human colonies were empty. Their populations vanished without a trace. Communication arrays went silent. Medical stations sent final automated messages, then nothing. By the end of the week, it was as if humanity had never existed at all, except for the questions they left behind, and the fear that they might have been right about something terrible coming. 6 months had passed since the humans disappeared. General Theclon stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at the tactical display with growing concern. Red warning symbols covered half the screen. Each one represented a new crisis somewhere in the galaxy. "Report," he ordered his communications officer. "Pirate raids in the Centauri system have increased by 400%, sir. The trade convoy to New Vega is 3 weeks overdue. And the Crystalline Collective has closed their borders to all Zephyrian ships." Theclon's scales darkened with frustration. 3 months ago, human patrol ships would have stopped those pirates before they reached the trade lanes. Human diplomats would have prevented the border closure with a few carefully chosen words. "What about the refugee situation on Kepler Prime?" he asked. His aide checked her datapad. "Critical, sir. Food shipments are down 60%. Medical supplies are almost gone. The camp populations have tripled since the humans left." Theclon closed his eyes. When humans ran those supply lines, refugees never went hungry. Their logistics networks had fed millions of displaced beings across the galaxy. Now those same refugees were dying because no one else had bothered to learn how the system worked. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving a distress signal from the Valorian mining colony on Theta 7. What's the situation?" "Catastrophic equipment failure, sir. The atmospheric processors are failing. They're requesting immediate evacuation." Theclon felt a familiar stab of anger and shame. Human engineers had maintained those processors for 60 years. They had offered to train Valorian technicians, but Theclon's people had been too proud to admit they needed help with their own machines. Now, 300,000 Valorians were going to die because of that pride. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out on 1,000 different worlds. On the energy fields of Proxima Station, the ethereal collective struggled with destabilizing quantum fluctuations. Human scientists had built the stabilization arrays that kept them alive. Without maintenance, the delicate energy beings began to fade away like dying stars. Captain Zurek of the Trade Federation watched his cargo manifest with growing despair. Half his planned routes were now too dangerous to travel without escort. The other half led to worlds that could no longer pay for goods because human economic advisors were no longer there to help them manage their resources. "We're going broke," his financial officer reported. 6 more trade companies declared bankruptcy this week. The outer rim markets have completely collapsed. Zurek had never thought much about human economic policies. They seemed boring compared to military glory or technological marvels. But now he realized those boring policies had kept entire star systems from falling into poverty and chaos. Dr. Yalna worked frantically in her medical bay, trying to save a young Helixian child. The disease was simple to treat if you had the right medicine. But that medicine came from human pharmaceutical factories that no longer existed. "Doctor," her assistant said quietly. "That's the 14th case this week. The medicine shortage is getting worse." Yalna's tentacles trembled with exhaustion and grief. She had always respected human medical knowledge, but she had never realized how dependent the galaxy had become on their research and production. Diseases that had been conquered decades ago were returning. Plagues that human doctors had stopped with simple vaccines were spreading across entire planets. The worst part was not the individual tragedies. It was the pattern. Every crisis revealed another way the galaxy had come to depend on humanity without realizing it. Border disputes that had been settled for generations flared back to life without human mediators. Old enemies remembered old grudges. The Zephyrian Empire and the Crystalline Collective, who had been at peace for 70 years, started moving warships toward their shared border. Environmental disasters that human monitoring systems would have detected early now caught entire worlds by surprise. Forest fires burned for months without human emergency response teams. Asteroid impacts went undetected until it was too late to evacuate. Even communication between species became harder. Human translation algorithms had been so good that most species had stopped learning each other's languages. Now simple diplomatic meetings turned into shouting matches because no one could understand what anyone else was trying to say. Supreme Counselor Venth called an emergency session of the Galactic Council. The ancient leader looked even older than before, her bioluminescent skin dim with worry. "We must face the truth," she told the assembled representatives. The humans were not just members of our galactic community. They were the foundation that held it together. "They were meddlers," General Theclon protested, though his voice lacked its usual conviction. "Always interfering in other species' business." "Were they?" asked Counselor Zeeks. Her crystalline form pulsed with sad colors. "Or were they preventing us from destroying ourselves? My people have logged over 2,000 critical system failures since they left. 2,000 disasters that would have killed millions if the humans hadn't seen them coming and helped us prepare." Representative Kethvar shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "The Zephyrian Empire is strong. We do not need human help to solve our problems." "Then why?" Venth asked quietly. "Are your people starving?" Your... The question hung in the air like a physical thing. Everyone knew the answer. The Zephyrian Empire had focused on military might for centuries, importing food from agricultural worlds. Human trade agreements had made that possible. Human cargo ships had carried the grain. Human economists had balanced the payments. Without them, the warrior culture was facing something their weapons could not defeat: famine. "What do you suggest we do?" asked Dr. Yalna. "Send ships to find them? Demand they return?" "Even if we could find them," Venth replied, "would we have the right? They warned us this would happen. They said judgment was coming, and we needed to learn to stand alone." "Superstitious nonsense," Theclon muttered. But his protests sounded hollow now. The galaxy was falling apart, exactly as the humans had predicted. In the weeks that followed the emergency session, some species tried to work together to solve the growing problems. The Ethereal Collective shared their energy technology with struggling colonies. The Crystalline Collective opened emergency food reserves. The Valorian Empire sent military ships to protect refugee convoys. But it was not enough. They were trying to catch up to centuries of human planning and preparation in a matter of months. For every problem they solved, 3 more appeared. And in the depths of space, long-range sensors began to detect something impossible. Gravitational anomalies were approaching from the void between galaxies. Something vast and ancient was coming toward them. Something that might explain why the humans had been so desperate to leave. Something that would test whether the galaxy could survive without the guardians who had protected them for so long. Dr. Kessara stared at her instruments with growing horror. The readings made no sense. According to her sensors, something the size of a small moon was approaching the outer rim of the galaxy. But when she tried to focus her telescopes on it, she saw only empty space. "Run the scan again," she ordered her assistant. "I've run it 12 times, Doctor," replied Ventalar nervously. "The gravitational signature is getting stronger. But visual confirmation shows nothing. It's like something invisible is bending space itself. In fact, it's not Condot." Kessara felt her tentacles curl with fear. As the galaxy's leading expert on deep space phenomena, she had seen many strange things. But this was different. This was impossible. "Send an emergency transmission to the Galactic Council," she ordered. "Code Black. We have a massive unknown contact approaching from extragalactic space." 3 days later, the Rim station went silent. Supreme Counselor Venth received the final transmission with shaking hands. Static filled most of the message, but Kessara's terrified voice came through clearly enough. "Can see them now. Ships that exist in multiple dimensions. They're not destroying the station. Gross." End quote. They're making it never existed. The records are changing. Help us." Then nothing. When the council tried to contact Rim Station, they found no records that it had ever been built. The star charts showed empty space, where a massive research facility had stood for 200 years. "This is impossible," General Theclon insisted. "You cannot erase something from history. Matter cannot simply cease to exist." But even as he spoke, more reports came in. The mining colony on Zerion Prime had vanished. Then the trade hub at Gateway Station. Then an entire star system called Haven. Each disappearance was the same. First, sensors detected massive gravitational disturbances. Then, panicked transmissions about impossible creatures and ships that phased in and out of reality. Finally, silence. And when rescue ships arrived, they found empty space and no records that anything had ever been there. "We need to evacuate the outer rim," Counselor Zix announced. Her crystalline form flashed urgent red patterns. "Whatever these things are, they're moving toward the core systems." "Evacuate to where?" asked Representative Kethvar. "At the rate they're moving, they'll reach the inner systems in less than a year." Dr. Yalna pulled up the oldest records in the galactic database. "I've been searching through historical files. There are references to something called the Great Silence that occurred roughly 500,000 years ago. Entire civilizations that simply stopped existing." "Legends," Theclon scoffed. "Stories to frighten younglings." "Legends." Theclon scoffed then. "Ender why? Are they?" Yalna asked quietly. "The pattern is identical. Advanced civilizations that vanish without trace. No ruins, no remains, no records. Just empty space where thriving worlds once existed." Supreme Counselor Venth studied the data with growing dread. In her 3,000 years of life, she had never seen anything that frightened her more than these disappearing stars. The first direct contact came 2 weeks later. Captain Mordeth commanded the Valorian dreadnought, one performant. Pride of warriors. When the distress call came from the agricultural world of New Eden, he responded with a full battle group, 12 of the most powerful warships in the galaxy, armed with weapons that could crack planets. They arrived to find New Eden under attack by creatures that defied every law of physics. "What in the void are those things?" Mordeth whispered. The beings attacking New Eden were massive, each one the size of a city. They looked like living shadows that occasionally became solid. Parts of their bodies existed in normal space, while other parts seemed to phase through dimensions that should not exist. When they moved, Reality itself seemed to bend around them. "Sir," his weapons officer reported, "I'm reading dimensional signatures I don't understand. These entities exist partially outside our space-time continuum." Quote, "Around the creatures, fleets of ships appeared and disappeared like phantoms. Some looked technological, others seemed almost organic. All of them moved with impossible grace through space that should have torn them apart. Open fire," Mordeth ordered. "All weapons, full power." The pride of warriors unleashed its full arsenal. Energy beams that could melt asteroids struck the creatures with enough force to destroy a dozen normal ships. The beams passed harmlessly through them like light through fog. "Kinetic rounds," Mordeth commanded desperately. "Maybe solid matter will work." Railguns fired projectiles at near-light speed. The creatures absorbed the impacts without even slowing down. Worse, the absorbed energy seemed to make them stronger. New tentacles of shadow grew from their bodies, reaching toward the Valorian fleet. "Sir," the sensor operator called out in terror, "they're not just immune to our weapons, they're learning from them. Each attack we make teaches them something new." One of the shadow beings turned its attention to the pride of warriors. As it approached, space-time began to twist around the dreadnought. The crew watched in horror as their own ship began to fade in and out of existence. "We're being unmade," the chief engineer reported, his voice filled with wonder and fear. "Our molecular structure is becoming unstable. The quantum bonds that hold matter together are dissolving." Mordeth gave the only order that made sense. "All ships, retreat, maximum speed. Warn the Council." Only 3 ships escaped. The rest didn't explode or break apart. They simply stopped existing, as if they had never been built. The survivors' own memories began to change, forgetting comrades who had never lived. The few refugees who escaped New Eden brought stories that no one wanted to believe. They spoke of creatures that existed in multiple realities at once, of ships that attacked from directions that didn't exist, of cities that were not destroyed, but transformed into something that had never been. "They're not just conquering us," one traumatized survivor told the Council. "They're rewriting reality itself, making it so we never existed in the first place." As panic spread across the galaxy, ancient archives were searched for any information about the attackers. Deep in the oldest ethereal databases, scholars found references to beings called the Devourers. According to fragmentary records, they came from the spaces between galaxies, consuming entire civilizations every few 100,000 years. But the most disturbing discovery came from abandoned human research facilities. A team of archaeologists exploring the ruins of Earth's Luna base found a sealed vault. Inside were research files that changed everything the galaxy thought they knew about humanity's departure. Dr. Sarah Chen's final log entry was dated 1 day before humanity's exodus. "We have confirmed the mathematical projections. The Devourers will arrive in our galaxy within 2 years. Traditional resistance is not only futile, it will ensure complete extinction for every species. But we have discovered something else. Something that changes the equation entirely. The Devourers are not just destroyers. They are judges. They consume civilizations that have become stagnant, dependent, or morally corrupt. But civilizations that can prove their worth through unity, sacrifice, and growth under pressure may survive." The key word is may. And only if they face the trial alone. Our presence invalidates the test. As long as humans remain to solve problems, mediate conflicts, and provide aid, the other species will never be forced to grow. They will never prove they deserve to survive. The hardest truth we have ever faced is this: to save them, we must abandon them. To give them a chance at life, we must let them think we have chosen death. God forgive us for what we are about to do, and God forgive us for what we will have to become if they fail. The files revealed humanity's terrible secret. They had known the Devourers were coming. They had calculated the odds of survival. And they had made the hardest choice any species had ever faced. They had left to save everyone they loved, even if those they saved would never understand why. Commander Sarah Kim floated in the meditation chamber of the human deep space vessel. Final hope. Around her, holographic displays showed the advancing Devourer fleets as they consumed another spiral arm of the galaxy. Entire star systems winked out of existence like candles being blown out. "Ma'am," her aide reported through the intercom. "We're receiving fragmentary transmissions from the galactic core. It appears they've found Dr. Chen's research files." Sarah opened her eyes. Her great-grandmother's research had been the foundation of humanity's most difficult decision. Now, the other species would finally understand why humans had abandoned them. "What's their reaction?" she asked. "Confusion, mostly. Anger. Some species are demanding we return immediately. Others are grateful, but horrified." Sarah nodded grimly. She had expected this response. The truth was too large and too terrible for most minds to accept easily. On her personal display, she pulled up the complete timeline of humanity's discovery. 200 years ago, the deep space exploration vessel, Magellan, had detected gravitational anomalies in the void between galaxies. Mathematical analysis revealed objects moving at impossible speeds toward the Milky Way. At first, scientists had theorized they were dealing with rogue planets or dark matter concentrations. But as data accumulated over decades, a horrifying picture emerged. The objects were artificial. They were intelligent. And they had consumed 3 neighboring galaxies over the past million years. Dr. Marcus Webb, Sarah's ancestor and the leader of Project Deepwatch, had made the breakthrough that changed everything. Hidden in quantum fluctuations from destroyed galaxies, his team found echoes of civilizations that had faced the Devourers before. The pattern was always the same. Advanced species that had grown comfortable, dependent on stronger neighbors, or morally stagnant, were consumed completely. But occasionally, rarely, a civilization survived by proving its worth under the ultimate pressure. "The Devourers are not destroyers, Dr. Webb had written in his classified report. They are gardeners. They prune the galactic tree, removing the dead wood so new growth can flourish. But the pruning process requires perfect conditions. Those conditions were brutal. The species being tested had to face the threat alone, without outside help. They had to overcome their differences and unite completely. They had to prove they could grow beyond their limitations when survival demanded it. Most importantly, they had to do it all while a caretaker species like humanity was present." Sarah pulled up another file from the archives. This one contained the transcripts of humanity's greatest debate. For 50 years, the best minds of their species had wrestled with an impossible moral equation. If they stayed to fight alongside their allies, they would doom everyone to certain extinction. The Devourers would see a dependent civilization that could not survive on its own merit. If they left, the galaxy might unite and prove itself worthy of survival. But they would have to abandon billions of beings they had sworn to protect. "We are not abandoning them," Dr. Chen had argued in the final debate. "We are giving them the only chance they have. The only chance any of us have. By making them think we're cowards," Admiral Torres had replied, "by letting them hate us as they die. Better they hate us and live than love us and die," Chen had said quietly. But there had been a third option, a backup plan so morally ambiguous that it had taken decades to approve. Sarah accessed the Protocol Prometheus files, reading her family's legacy of impossible choices. If the galactic species failed their test, if they could not unite and overcome the Devourers alone, then humanity would implement its final gambit. They would become something else. Something that could fight the Devourers on equal terms. Something that existed partially outside normal reality, just as their enemies did. The cost would be humanity itself. To gain the power needed to battle cosmic entities, they would have to stop being fully human. They would become guardians who existed between dimensions, protecting the galaxy from threats it could never see or understand. "Ma'am," her aide called again. "The Devourer advance has accelerated. They've reached the inner spiral arms. The core worlds have maybe 6 months before the first wave arrives." Sarah studied the tactical displays. The galactic species had surprised her. Despite their differences, despite centuries of mutual distrust, they were starting to work together. The Valorian Empire was sharing military technology with former enemies. The Crystalline Collective had opened their resource vaults to feed refugees. Even the proud Ethereal Collective was cooperating with species they had previously considered beneath them. But it might not be enough. The Devourers were not just powerful. They were experienced. They had tested and consumed thousands of civilizations over the millennia. They knew every strategy, every desperate gambit that cornered species might attempt. Sarah opened a secure channel to the other human ships scattered across the dark spaces beyond the galaxy. 50 vessels, each carrying the remnants of humanity's greatest minds and most advanced technology. "All ships, this is Final Hope," she transmitted. "Report status of Protocol Prometheus preparations." One by one, the responses came back. The quantum transformation chambers were ready. The dimensional phase generators had been calibrated. The consciousness transfer matrices were online. Dr. James Park, speaking from the research vessel, New Prometheus, delivered the final report. "We've completed the theoretical framework. The process will work, but once we begin, there's no going back. We'll exist partially outside space-time, just like the Devourers. We'll have the power to fight them, but we'll no longer be human in any meaningful sense." Sarah felt the weight of history pressing down on her. Every choice humanity had made for 2 centuries had led to this moment. Every sacrifice, every difficult decision, every moment of doubt and pain had been preparation for what was coming. "What about the galactic species?" asked Captain Rivera from the last stand. "Are they showing the unity the Devourers require?" Sarah checked the intelligence reports. Wars between traditional enemies were ending as species faced the greater threat. Resource sharing had increased dramatically. Former rivals were fighting side by side against impossible odds. "They're trying," she admitted. But trying may not be enough. The Devourers have consumed civilizations that showed perfect unity. The test isn't just about cooperation. It's about growth under pressure, about becoming something greater than what you were before. There. "Then we proceed with the protocol?" Dr. Park asked quietly. Sarah looked out at the stars, knowing that many of them might not exist much longer. Somewhere out there, beings she had never met were fighting for their right to exist. Children were being born who might never see their first birthday. Entire cultures were facing extinction. "We proceed," she said finally. "Begin the transformation sequence. If the galaxy fails its test, we'll be ready to implement the final solution." "Even though it means we'll never be human again?" Captain Rivera asked. Sarah thought of her great-grandmother, Dr. Chen, who had died believing her own species hated her for abandoning the galaxy. She thought of all the humans who had lived in exile for 200 years, carrying the burden of terrible knowledge. "We stopped being fully human the day we chose to save the galaxy instead of ourselves," she said. "Now, we just make it official." The transformation chambers powered up across the human fleet. One way or another, the long exile was about to end. Either the galaxy would prove itself worthy of survival, or humanity would make sure it survived anyway. The sky above New Geneva burned with impossible colors as reality itself began to break down. General Teclon watched from his command center as Devourer ships phased in and out of existence around the planet, each appearance bringing them closer to the city shields. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're getting reports from across the galaxy. The core worlds are falling faster than projected. Earth's solar system was consumed 6 hours ago." Theclon felt his scales turn pale. Earth had been humanity's birth world, even though they had abandoned it centuries ago. If the Devourers had reached that far into the inner systems, nowhere was safe. Around him, representatives from dozens of species worked side by side at control stations. Zephyrian engineers worked with crystalline technicians to modify shield generators. Ethereal energy beings shared power with Valorian defense systems. It was the most complete cooperation in galactic history. It still wasn't enough. The dimensional distortions are increasing, reported Dr. Yalna from the science station. The Devourers aren't just attacking our ships and planets. They're unmaking the space-time fabric that holds reality together. Through the massive windows of the command center, Theclon could see the effects. Stars flickered like dying candles. Space itself seemed to ripple and fold. In some areas, the laws of physics simply stopped working. "Sir," called out Counselor Zix, "I'm reading massive energy signatures approaching from the outer system. Something's coming through the Devourer blockade." Theclon turned to the tactical display, expecting to see more enemy ships. Instead, he saw something that made his blood freeze. "Those are human ships," he whispered. 50 vessels emerged from folded space, their hulls gleaming with energy patterns he didn't recognize. They moved wrong, phasing in and out of reality like the Devourers themselves. But where the enemy ships felt cold and alien, these felt familiar, safe. "How is that possible?" Dr. Yalna asked. "Human ships can't phase between dimensions." 4. Her answer came in the form of a transmission broadcast on all frequencies. The voice was human, but there was something strange about it, as if it was coming from multiple dimensions at once. "This is Admiral Sarah Kim of the Terran Dimensional Fleet. We're sorry we had to leave. We're sorrier that we have to return." On the main screen, Admiral Kim's image appeared. She looked human, but not quite. Her form seemed to shift between solid matter and pure energy. Her eyes held depths that suggested she existed in more than 3 dimensions. "You came back," Theclon said, activating his own transmitter. "Why?" "Why? Because you proved yourselves worthy," Kim replied. "In the past 6 months, your species have accomplished something remarkable. You've overcome centuries of mistrust and prejudice. You've united against an impossible threat. You've grown beyond what you were before. But not enough to defeat the Devourers," Counselor Zix pointed out. Kim's expression grew sad. "No, not enough for that. Which is why we must do what we came back to do." The human ships moved into attack formation, but their tactics were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They fought the Devourers in multiple dimensions simultaneously, attacking from angles that shouldn't exist. Their weapons operated on principles that defied known physics. "How are they doing that?" Dr. Yalna breathed. "By becoming like our enemies," Kim explained. "We spent 200 years learning to exist partially outside normal reality. We transformed ourselves into something that could fight beings who exist between dimensions. The battle was beautiful and terrible to watch. Human ships phased through solid matter, struck at Devourer vessels from impossible directions, and wielded energy types that made space itself burn with strange fire. For the first time since the invasion began, the alien attackers were taking damage, but the cost was becoming apparent. With each attack, the human ships became more transparent, more ghost-like. They were literally burning away pieces of themselves to power weapons that could harm cosmic entities. "You're sacrificing yourselves," Theclon realized. "Yes," Kim said simply. "To become powerful enough to fight the Devourers, we had to stop being fully human. To defeat them completely, we have to stop existing in normal reality altogether." On the tactical display, more human ships were winking out of existence. But each sacrifice weakened the Devourer forces. The impossible creatures that had seemed invincible were retreating, their dimensional ships taking heavy damage. "There's something else," Kim continued. "The Devourers aren't just invaders. They're also teachers. Species that pass their test, that prove they can unite and grow under ultimate pressure, earn something precious. What? Asked Supreme Counselor Venth, her ancient voice transmitted from the council chambers. Protection, guidance. A place in a larger community of species that have faced and survived this trial. As she spoke, space around the galaxy began to shimmer. New ships appeared, vessels from civilizations that had passed the test millions of years ago. They came not as conquerors but as welcomers, ready to greet the newest members of an ancient fraternity. Your species have earned the right to survive and grow, Kim said. But we won't be here to see it. The last battle took place around the galactic core, where the most powerful devourer entities had gathered. Sarah Kim herself led the final assault, her ship transforming into pure energy as it struck at the heart of the enemy formation. This is for everyone we couldn't save, she transmitted, as her vessel became a star-bright explosion of quantum fire. This is for the future. You'll build without us. The explosion rippled across multiple dimensions. When the light faded, the devourer forces were gone. But so were the human ships. In their place, a network of quantum energy spread through the galaxy's structure, weaving itself into the fabric of space-time itself. Humanity hadn't just defeated the devourers. They had become a permanent barrier between dimensions, ensuring that such entities could never threaten the galaxy again. In the months that followed, the galactic species began to rebuild. But they built something different than what had existed before. The crisis had forced them to truly cooperate, to see past old prejudices and fears. The society they created was stronger, wiser, and more unified than anything that had come before. Children born after the war grew up learning about the species that had sacrificed everything to save them. Human names were remembered in songs and stories. Human values of cooperation, sacrifice, and protection became the foundation of the new galactic civilization. And sometimes, late at night, sensitive beings reported hearing whispers in the quantum static between stars. Voices offering guidance, warning of dangers, sharing wisdom from the spaces between spaces. Humanity had kept their promise. They couldn't stay, but they never really left. 10 years after the war, a young Zephyrian girl asked her grandmother why the stars sometimes seemed to sing. The old warrior, whose scales had turned silver with age and wisdom, smiled gently. Those are the guardians, child. The species that loved us enough to become something else so we could live. They watch over us from places we cannot see, keeping us safe from things we cannot imagine. Will they ever come back? The girl asked. Her grandmother looked up at the stars, where quantum lights danced in patterns that seemed almost like writing. They never left, dear one. They just found a new way to protect us. They became the foundation that holds our galaxy together, the invisible hands that guide us toward a better future. And they'll always be there? Always, the grandmother promised. As long as there are stars to shine and life to protect, humanity will be there in the spaces between, making sure we never face the darkness alone. The stars pulsed gently, as if in agreement, and across the galaxy, billions of beings slept safely under the protection of guardians who had chosen love over existence, duty over glory, and sacrifice over survival. Humanity's greatest victory was not defeating an enemy. It was ensuring that their ideals would live forever.